So today I will talk about GlotPress. So that's what powers translate.wordpress.org. So before we start, a little bit about me. I'm the lead developer of GlotPress. I contributed back to WordPress for around 10 releases now, and I work for 101 at a hosting company as their WordPress specialist. So to start with, what is GlotPress? So GlotPress is a collaborative web-based software translation tool. It has been built a few years ago in 2009, and it will let you or your entire team to translate your favorite software. For our case, it will be WordPress, but it can be your favorite mobile app, for example. And it is as open source as WordPress is. So it has all different features. It has like different roles. So by itself, it has translators, validators, and admins. So every user who is registered, it will be a translator. And he can submit translations, but they're not approved yet. So you need a validator or an admin who can approve them. So there you can say, like, you can manage the strings. You can, even when you have approved it, you can reject it. You can have now a glossary with common words. So you can be more sure that that one word, for example, in WordPress, say post, it will always be translated the same way. And you can check that when in GlotPress that what the translation should be. So if you see a string, that word will be highlighted and you will see in what kind of cases, like if it's a verb or not, how it should be translated. And we support different kind of formats. So we have Mo and Po files, but we also have support for Android, for Windows. We had it for Windows Mobile, we removed it. We have it for iOS. And you can even add your own formats if needed. So by default, the theme is quite plain. So this is how the theme by itself looks like. But if you want, you can create a custom theme. So this is the same, almost the same HTML format, but I put like a bootstrap sauce around it. And how it works is basically how GlotPress works is like you have like a bunch of strings. This one is from Japanese, and you can see all the translations there. And when you want to change something, you can just click on it. It will open a dialog with text editor. And then you can submit the translation for this string. You also see like all kinds of information. Like you see it's untranslated. You see if there is a context, what the context will be. You can leave comments. You see the references on the files. And if, for example, with WordPress, it has already linked to the track. So when you click on it, it will go to the code base, to the right line, and you see, if you're a little bit of a developer, you can see where the string has been used and how you should translate it. And as a validator or admin, you can also set the priority. So by default, it's always normal, but you can also hide it as an admin, that people cannot translate it anymore, or you can say it's more important because before it was from Windows Mobile, some strings had to be translated, otherwise your app will be declined. Even if you remove the language, it will be approved, but some strings are required to have. So a little bit about the story behind it. It was started in 2008, like really basic, and I believe in 2009 WordPress started using it. At that point it was using Backpress, until this date it's still using it, even though Backpress has not been developed for years, and it was like the tool but also supported BuddyPress and BBPress since a few years ago. Since then they are now plugins, and that's something what GlotPress simply can't do. It's fully object-oriented programmed, and in 2013 I started managing GlotPress, first by simple changes, and now I do like really big changes that are needed for the WordPress project. The date is wrong. In 2014 we had our first Google Summer of Code project, so we had like a student who was basically his whole summer dedicated to make GlotPress better, and he built a functionality like the profiles that is now committed but not yet used on translate.wordpress.org that allows you to see what a user does. Like you can see, as a validator for example, what kind of strings he works on. Like maybe at one point you can see the ratio, like maybe you see that user has only 10% approved strings. For all the strings he submitted, only 10 were approved. So you know that probably that user you'd never want to be a validator. But if you can see at one point, like you need validators, you can see, oh, that user submitted 1,000 strings and 99% was approved. At that point, you probably want that person as a validator. And a little bit how it is structured. So what I said is object-oriented based. It uses backpress, but it has a lot of cool classes and also functionality functions from WordPress. Has been a few years ago that the WordPress code base has been merged in there, but like if you as a developer, you can write for WordPress, but the same functionality probably also exists in GlotPress. And on top of that, we built a lot of cool stuff around it, like routers. We have like something like formats and things. I will talk a little bit later on that. Those three types of objects always need to extend the generic class what has functionality that you always need. So for example, if you have like a format for the POMO, you always have like certain methods that needs to be used, like an export and an import that is required for a format to have. And a little bit about the GP_ thing. Like when I started with GlotPress, that was probably the weirdest thing I saw in GlotPress. Like the name itself, it says nothing, like a thing that can be everything. But what it does is like it has a lot of generic code to make it easier for you. You can have like an array to say like this names in a database are required to have. So a GP thing can be like a glossary. So in the glossary you can say like the name is required to have. We can also say description is required to have. We only needed to fill in an array and the main GP thing already validated it for us. We don't have to do anything more. And like the things we currently have are like project, user, translations, also permissions, and it's all based on the same thing. Like GP thing also does the database handling. Like it all, like if you want to say like one row, you can say get row, say the number, and the GP thing will already do all the queries for you. We still use functions, especially if on validation, like synthesizing strings. We also have the hook system of WordPress. And that's really the greatest thing what I said before. As for GlotPress, especially if you're a WordPress developer and you want to extend GlotPress, there are the things that are required because now, without too much effort in reading documentation, you can already build a simple plugin to say, I want to change the header of GlotPress. You don't need to read like a whole different template parser because we are pretty close in how WordPress works. And there are so many other great functionality that WordPress has that maybe you will not use, but it's still there. We also have some CLI commands, so especially it's really important for us to have it because till now, GlotPress doesn't have user management. So if you want to make someone an admin, you need a CLI command to say like, oh yeah, add admin with the username and then it will be added. You can't do that through the UI. To the UI, you can only say this user is a validator of check with a certain project type. So for German, we have like formal, informal. We can also say like someone is only validated for the formal one and not the informal. And you can also like do import and export of originals and translations. And because of that, you can create a cool ways, like a lot of possibilities to do automatic tasks. So on WordPress.org, those CLI commands are used every hour to generate, like make POT, the pod files, and then the GlotPress CLI is being used to import those files. So a little bit about how WordPress is using it on translate.wordpress.org. So they also changed the header and the footer so that you have like the normal header you see on WordPress.org. They have like a nice like banner to say like, well, if you're new to WordPress translation, well, here's a starting guide. And that's a really simple plugin to GlotPress. It only is like 40, 50 lines of code and you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. So the current status is that we have currently 141 locales with a WP locale on GlotPress. And 41 of them are up to date. 15 of them are still running 4.1. 8 are like one major version behind, but it's still kind of okay. But there are like also like first locales that are like 16 in total who are like more than that behind. And the oldest of that one is 2.8.5. So before you can still download it from the locale page, but it's not allowed anymore. I think only one major is allowed. But we still have like 61 locales that don't have a website or a package yet. And in total of this one, I think it's still the case, is 40 of them have a language pack. What is pretty cool, what is a new feature like what we built last year, and the end of last year, is that you now have a language page. It's still pretty basic. It needs more work, especially if we add a lot of plugins and themes to translate the WordPress.org, because this page will be unmanageable. But what you now see is like you have like a nice overview, like which projects are 100% translated. You can see like how many waiting strings, and for check, you still see there's work to do. Like nothing is 100% yet, so we don't have translation pack for check yet. But probably if it has enough validators, then if all those waiting strings are approved, probably it is 100%, give or take. And for the future, we need more integration in the WordPress environment. What I said, like we all now also have profiles in GlotPress, but for translate the WordPress.org, they have been disabled. But you can already see, like, if we have that, how cool it will be to integrate that in profiles of WordPress.org. So instead of like you see from the user the plugins and themes and what they do and the social media, you then also see another step, like how do they validate and what do they validate? What are their interests? And what I said, like soon it will include all plugins and themes. We're already busy with that. Like to parse the README file, to make the README files of plugins translatable, and for themes we're already looking at that too. So when I did a scan like a year ago, roughly 10,000 plugins had that text domain set up correctly and you could translate them. If we now would include 10,000 plugins in GlotPress, it will probably die really fast because the code base was never built for that. So some of the new features we built in the last year was what I mentioned, glossaries. So here you see almost all the words that currently are in the glossary of the development of WordPress. So it's not a lot, but you already see like port of speed, like if it's a noun, a verb, or adjective, and how it should be translated. If we would add more, you can see what the power will be. Like how more stuff you have in the glossary, how better your translation will be, because you know which words should be translated. That was what I had built from last year. So the Google Summer of Code student built everything, and I basically rewrite a lot to make it more simpler and again to have speed improvement, because when I did it the first time, it could not be added on WordPress.org because I tested it on a few thousand rows in the tables. At that point, GlotPress in the translation table had 9 million. And then the queries I did would kill it. But you already see here like the cool information you will get of a user. Like it will say like, well, admin knows Bulgarian, but also knows Romanian. So it only shows 1 or 2 languages, never more. So there are the 2 languages that person translated the most in. So you already know like, well, okay, he did some stuff, and then you see like the recent project for like a few months ago. So you will see like, okay, which projects is he more interested in? And you can also see which project he can validate. Because of this, you can know like, well, find out for which plugin, if you like interested in that one, you can ask that person, oh, I see you translated, for example, WordPress SEO from Yoast. I want to help out, like what can I do? Currently you have no clue at all. Like we know a little bit about WordPress plugins, WordPress core files who are validators. But the moment we add plugins and themes, there is no information currently available for you to find out. And some of the upcoming features that were requested like in the last 2 years since I'm a lead developer are like the client with feedback. So currently, as a validator, you have no possibility to communicate with translators, because maybe some of them have a personal website with maybe a contact form, but in generally, the only thing you can do is the client string. And most likely, the translator will be pissed at you because he is clueless. He has no clue why you declined it. And it will be really, for you as a validator and for the translator, it will be really awesome to say like, oh yeah, you have, instead of GlotPress with 2 S's, you wrote 3. Please fix it. So instead the validator would fix it, no, the translator will fix it, so and then will increase the quality of that translator work. And that in the end needs to be the goal, to make translator WordPress.org manageable for the project. The next step, what I already built like our profiles, but we really would love to have like a dashboard, like say, these are my favorite plugins. And including that also the notification, like they are my favorite plugins, but when there are new translations for this plugin, I want to be notified because I want that plugin, probably most likely because it's your plugin, to be 100% translatable for Czech or for Dutch, German, whichever language you are interested in. And we also need an improved workflow. So GlotPress has been built in 2008, the team has been built until around 2010. Since then, small changes were made, but probably if you would have used GlotPress, you would have found out that it's not always that intuitive that it could have been. There are like ways that you can say like, that particular string has been translated 10 times. But now you see, go to the box, you probably want to fill in an improvement of that string, but you then have to click on a button to see what the history was. You would expect that history to see directly because that's why you translate that string. You need that information. That information is the most important. And last one is like, we also will build a new team. Like, I will build it on GitHub. It's a little bit easier than SVN. I can give permissions to everyone that I want because currently with GlotPress I can't. And together we can build a better team for GlotPress that is more intuitive, it has more functionality, but without make a mess out of the team. That you add functionality, but there is no place, so you just randomly place the functionality. And more important, what can you do as a developer with GlotPress? Again, use it yourself. There are a lot of use cases where developers using GlotPress for their teams, plugins, or projects. As I said, like one of the most interesting bugs I found was with importing translations for Android. With Android, you have array support. Like you can say like, it's an XML file and it's like PO file, but it has a list of strings. But for the XML file, you can say like, this is a collection of strings. Those strings were never imported in GlotPress. Like no user of WordPress who translate the Android app would know this because they don't know what the possibilities are, they just translate what they see. And because of an Android user, a developer who has nothing to do with WordPress, we fixed this kind of bug. And it was, for me, that was really helpful, and it sees you the power why GlotPress should be bigger than WordPress. Because if we don't do it, we don't get the right amount of contributors to GlotPress. Like currently, last year, roughly around 14, 15 different people worked on GlotPress. Like before, it would be 5 tops, and most of them would only change the locale list, what is always from GlotPress. That's, like now we are roughly around 15 people, we have a lot of commits done, and because of that, you can more trust GlotPress to be where you can build on. And another cool thing what I built last year is like, if you would use it for your premium plugin or theme, and you would use something like GlotPress, but every other tool is really hard to get the translations from. Like, you can't say like download all the translations. And I tried to first do it in GlotPress, but the problem is, it all depends on what you're doing. Like, what should be the file format? Like for plugins, it needs the text domain. For themes, it doesn't. And for iOS and Android apps, it has a whole folder structure. So the folder name is the locale. And because of that, I made a grunt test that has all the power for you to change how it should be stored. It's easy to use, but it's a little bit maybe hard to configure depending on what your needs are. And especially if you use grunt, like this is like I should probably first say what grunt is. So what grunt is basically a test runner built in JavaScript, and you can do a lot of cool stuff with CLI. And for the GlotPress plugin, I also put it in NPM, what is basically plugin management if you know Composer for PHP. And how the end looks like is you have like a grunt task saying like my domain part is in languages. This one then for plugins. My URL for my GlotPress installation is wptranslate.org. My slug is Tabify edit screen, and my text domain is the same. And when I then run the grunt test GlotPress _download, it will download all the languages that are there. So instead by hand downloading the PO file, then the MO file, go back two pages back to go to the right locale again and do it again. For Yoast, for example, they spend normally like 6 hours getting all the translation updated, roughly. Now it's one click on a button. It takes, depending how much you have, like a few minutes, and you're done. And another part of GlotPress is building plugins. So for WordPress, it doesn't matter what you do. And like you can build procedure, you can make object-oriented class, like as long as you do add hook or add action, add filter to make to add the hook, you're fine. But for GlotPress, we have something called GP_plugin, what has a few useful methods. So, and it all defines based on your ID. And because of that ID, you can just call get option and update option with any name there is, because there will never be a clash because of the ID. But also add action and add filter or like wrapper. So what it does is say like add action in it, then the method name also should be in it. So you don't need to specify yourself like array, brackets, first argument is this and the second one is in it. And the same goes for remove action and filter. So in the end, this is how your base of your plugin would look like. So you say like, my first plugin extends GP_plugin. My public ID is my first plugin. You have like constructs where stuff happens. And then you say to the singleton of GlotPress, what people could like or dislike, to say like, oh, this plugin is there. So every other plugin could basically call it if needed. And there are a few plugins out there. So for Yoast, they have like a little plugin for SEO to fix some stuff that is broken in GlotPress, and we probably should merge it in. But the second one is pretty cool. They have like an internationalization module for their plugins. So for example, they increased in 1 week around 100 translated because of this. What it does is it highlights in their plugin setting page that it can be translated. They show what the current status is. They will say it's 80% translated. Please help us out to make the last 20 happen. And for them, it really helps out because they already increased with, I don't know how many translated by now. And it's pretty cool what they do. I built my own plugins around it. So for WP Translate is one side, and I use APCU as an object cache. So by default, Backpress supports memcache, but I don't have that one yet. And at that point, I was like, I would rather use APCU for that moment. And I just grabbed that one and I simply replace it with the APCU calls. But I also have like a simple analytics one. That's basically copy pasting the JavaScript from Google and you can fill in the UI ID. And where the new team is based on is like a child team. So for GlotPress, if you want to make a child team, you need to say like, oh, you need to build a plugin. Like GlotPress only supports one team. But in a plugin, you can say, this is the location, this is the possible location of a new team. So you could build parent team or child team support. Like you can have multiple child teams if you want to. And that shows the power of what you can do with GlotPress. The last one is a pretty cool one, what is basically an updater. So I have a whole UI built for SVN and for Git to say like, this is my repo, please update. And you can see that on WP Translate. Like I have my custom team, analytics is run. I even have a little plugin for a menu because GlotPress also doesn't have menu support. It has no pages at all. It's basically only solely focused on translating. But if you then look at the updater, you can say like, it's active. Active means I have a cron job every day running. And if it's active, at that point, this project, so for Pod Framework, will be updated with the latest translations. I say what kind of type it is. It's a plugin. I have to say what is the main file. If I would update it to the latest make pod file, pod plugin, then I don't need to do that anymore. And I can fill in what is the repository. So for SVN, obviously it has support for branches, for tags, trunk, whatever, because it's based on URL. For Git, it's only the master branch for now. And you can say like, okay, please update all the originals now. When you press it, it will download all the translations, and you have it in place, and then you can save the settings to store everything up, so the next time the cron job will run, everything is fine. So for example, if I go to this page, I will press the button, it will download the, let me see, which side, this side. So at that point, it will say 0 strings were updated, but were added, but 842 were updated. Currently, it doesn't show when the strings are removed, but again, it's pretty easy to add because I get that information from the hook system, or from the action I trigger. And what I do is basically this whole list, what you see here, is filterable by a filter. And then you can also see, like for example, with permissions, if you want to add a username, you can do it here. But yeah, for updaters, simply going to this one, press save. Then our settings are saved, so if I want to change it to like a different URL, I can do that too. And then I can simply press update. It's still a private project because I still want to add tags and branches, because I believe that is required for like an updater script to have, especially since probably most of you guys use Git, or at least GitHub, or something related. And last step is a little bit about the tools we're using. So I find it really important that the code I write is really clean, it has unit tested, and if it decreases, that I then get a trigger to myself that I need to work on it. So we do have a certain amount of unit tests, and we run it with Travis. And then with Scrutinize, I don't know if you know it, Scrutinize shows you the quality of your code. So it will see documentation is missing, it will highlight if code has been duplicated, so you can work on it to make it, to remove duplicated code, so it will be used the same code base. And with coveralls, it will then track what the code coverage is. So I think for GlotPress is around 40%. What is not a lot, but I'm sure that WordPress is even worse, I hope. And with that kind of tools, every time I make changes and it gets synced with SVN to GitHub, this stuff will be triggered, and I know when my code quality will get worse. It should always get better. And when it gets worse, suddenly I stop working on features, and I will then start more working on making the code more unit testable and have the quality better. So one of the focus would be for this year would be having more documentations by PHP doc, because currently there is none. So if you as a developer want to extend GlotPress, but you have like that specific use case, for example, say you want we have like a Google Translate plugin, but you want to use Microsoft Bing Translate. Suddenly you need to know, you have now a plugin that you can look at, but probably you need to look at core functionality of GlotPress. It's not as easy as it sounds, because it's a lot of object-oriented build. There are a lot of references to each other, and you need to know how it works. And that was my talk. Thank you for listening. And any questions? None? Oh, Andreas, yes?
Yeah, sure. So for the command line stuff, we use WPC after it, or is it completely outside of?
Completely outside of that, sorry.
You change it.
You should help.
No clue,
No, but basically what it does is make the make pod plugin or script grabs all the information from the PO file. So in the PO file you will see the code lines, and that information is being parsed in GlotPress. So I don't know how you would use WP-Sly to make that better.
And the plugin system you have, is this something that also the people at WordPress are looking at, or?
So for WordPress, they build it, I think only the notification plugin. I think they have maybe one or two more. I don't know. I know that currently for the language pages, locale pages, they have like a splitter for German and for Portuguese where you have formal, informal. I don't know if that was done in GlotPress or as a plugin. But basically it's the same way of building stuff for WordPress. So they will, if it's needed or required for the stuff they do, it will happen. And most of the time it will be just included in GlotPress because all the other people can benefit from it too. Yes? Oh, sorry. Apparently, wait. Yeah, he can repeat. I did not fully understand it, sorry. And put it on.
So, since WordPress documentation, like Wiki, right, is in multiple languages, what's the difference between that and GlotPress?
So, it's basically a whole different tool. So GlotPress is basically built for translating, actively making the same files between English and Czech. So basically for a wiki, there is no structure in between. Like you can write a whole different page in Czech about something on WordPress that has no English content. So basically what GlotPress would force is something more like you can compare with the multilingual press Babel. It really forced to have the same content in multiple places. You have your base content and it needs to be translated or not to the different one. So with Wiki you have all the freedom, and with GlotPress it's more forced to have, in general, English translated to other languages. I think that was all. So thank you for listening.